I just started the recording, Savannah.
Thank you. Okay, and so we'll call the meeting to order. I have a feeling it will probably be on the shorter side today because I know Representative Marcotte needs to leave at by two, excuse me, and when Scott Giles joins, he needs to leave by 2 as well. Anyway, so we're calling the meeting to order and we are reviewing and approving the agenda. Anybody have any changes or anything that they would like to add? Okay, hearing none. Anybody want to add some public comment? No? Okay. So we are going to take action on the March 4th meeting minutes. And I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'd move that we approve the minutes from our March meeting as distributed.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. And were there any additions, corrections, or anything like that? Anything that you wanted?
Savannah, I just have a quick question. Since my status on the executive committee is not quite clear, I don't want to mess up a vote by voting when my vote might not count. Is my vote needed on this one or?
In the minutes?
Yeah, for anything really. I mean,
I'm guessing that your vote will not be needed for the minutes.
Okay.
Jim.
I won't vote. Like I said, I would hate to
Yeah,
invalidate a vote. Oh, thanks.
I appreciate you asking. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, hands up or an aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, sounds like any nays? Okay, it's unanimous. The minutes are approved. Thank you. There's Lyle. Hello, Lyle.
Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. No worries. We just approved the March meeting minutes. And I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add. Okay, I got the thumbs up. Okay.
All good.
Okay, good. We'll move on to the next discussion item then. The Workforce Pell Implementation Group. Just as a reminder, the folks who are on this small group before we really get started on it are myself, Drake, Ruth Durkee, Ryan DeLude, and Tiffany Walker from CCV, and Shearson Baum from VSAC. And we've been attending these academies through the NGA and other things. And the rule came out and we have till April 8th, which is Wednesday, to submit comments. We, meaning the state. Vermont will not be submitting comments at this point. And the requirements are still very similar to what we heard in the fall, in that the credential or the training needs to be between 100 and 599 hours, 8 to 15 weeks. It has to be registered for more than a year before it will count. And when in our last academy meeting, there were a number of different states saying that the typical courses that would count for like a CCV or other providers are all 16 to 20 weeks. And if they reformulated the course so that it fits within that time frame, would it still be considered at least a year old? And we were told no. So that we're going to look to start thinking about doing a pilot in 2027 with a limited number of courses. And we're going to regroup in May to talk about, next steps and how to do that. And in the meantime, on Thursday of this week, the NGA is also hosting a webinar on how to do all of the data collection so that you can be certified and approved by the federal government for the Workforce Pell monies, which that'll be interesting and important to understand, because there's also the 70% of the people who sign up for the course or the training need to complete it. And then there needs to be a certain calculation with the return on investment on how much it increased their salaries, et cetera, vis-a-vis the cost of the Pell money. So more to come on that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sabina, would you just be kind enough to remind us how much money is at stake? How much Workforce Pell money is there for potentially for us?
Yeah. Until last week, let me rephrase that. It appears that the Workforce Pell money will become part of the full Pell package for each state. And perhaps, Scott, you have better information on this than I do. But then I saw something last week that they might up it a little bit.
Yeah, so Pell functions almost like an entitlement, even though it's not. So there's not an allocation per state. It is based on the eligibility of the students in the programs. So it's the amount that we would get would be directly tied to how many students participated in programs using the new Workforce Pell eligibility. Another way to think about it is that students were already eligible for Pell Grant money, but these programs weren't. So now they'll be able to use their current Pell Grant eligibility for a shorter term industry recognized credential. It's not that we're getting new money, or we'll get new money if students who otherwise would not have gone pursue training.
And Scott, isn't it true too, Scott, that the lifetime cap on Pell stays the same? So
That is correct.
There's the potential that people participating in Workforce Pell, it could affect their ability to access more traditional Pell if they sort of cap out.
At a later date, that would be correct.
And given that Vermont has the advancement grant, which this becomes another tool in the toolbox, but the advancement grant is probably our better tool. Is that fair to say, Scott?
Yes, it is. I think it is, the advancement grant, maximum grant is larger, and there is a dedicated amount of money for it. What I would say is that if we are successful in figuring out how to utilize Workforce Pell, there is the possibility that state dollars can go further in terms of supporting students. So I think of the opportunity there as being our ability to leverage our state dollars because they would be the last ones going in.
Makes sense.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott. That's helpful.
Does anybody else have any questions about Workforce Pell? Besides, we all have questions, but it'll become clearer. Yes.
I would just add that it's becoming pretty clear that the major lift for states is around the data collection piece for Workforce Pell. So those are a lot of the conversations we've been having. VSC and CCV have been thinking about that a lot. So I think we are not alone in pursuing a pretty conservative initial implementation strategy. It seems like that's what all other states we've talked to are doing. And I do think a lot of the way that Vermont has been designing shorter term programs at this point may not make them a good fit for Workforce Pell, because a lot of them have been really intentionally designed to be stackable and lead to other credentials and degrees. So we're also trying to be very intentional about making sure that Workforce Pell is the right fit for high quality program design, not trying to design programs to fit into a program that in any way that like sacrifices quality or student experience. So it will probably be a longer runway until we really figure out how to apply Workforce Pell in a meaningful way, so it's been great to have CCV and VSAC as part of the sort of initial implementation work group. And we'll definitely want to keep the doors open for more folks to engage, because we know a lot of folks are interested, and there's some state flexibility, but pretty prescriptive federal guidelines, and we still don't have a final rule yet. So Tiffany couldn't join today, but I know that's something that they've been thinking about a lot at CCV. So hopefully we can continue to chat about this at future meetings.
Okay, so moving on then, I'm going to pass the baton to Drake and just let her give a little brief where we are with the one-stop certification and what happened last week, and answer questions and all of that. Yeah.
Okay, so I will start that, and Chris and Kendall were both there. So if y'all have anything to add, please jump in.
Sure.
So y'all will recall that last summer we coordinate, or we didn't, I wasn't in this job yet. There was a certification visit at the Comprehensive One Stop, which we have one of in Burlington. According to federal regulations, we have to certify once every 3 years that the services delivered through the Comprehensive One Stop Center are meeting federal guidelines. So that included the 4 title holders under WIOA. So that's the Department of Labor, Higher Ability, the Agency of Education, and the Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And that initial visit happened last June. It was June 27th. The review group concluded that they recommended and were going to require a follow-up site visit, because and again, I'm sort of trying to capture what I have heard about this site visit, but they wanted more meaningful participation by those core partners. So we've been prepping for that for a number of months. All the core partners have been really wonderful to work with in preparing for that visit, which happened on March 25th. And it was great. I think there was a lot of good participation across our different core partners. And I believe on Friday, Sabina sent out a couple of documents sort of describing the outcomes from that certification visit, which I can go through one by one. But the sort of, long story short is that the review group did increase some of the ratings on different indicators. So the rating structure was, no evidence of compliance, of all these different types of indicators around customer satisfaction, service integration, many more, ADA compliance, having accessible materials and assistive technology, et cetera. There were many of them. So 7 of those indicators had an improved rating from the last certification visit. 9 indicators sort of stayed where they were, and 2 indicators achieved full compliance, particularly around the MOU for one-stop partners. So I think the core partners were able to demonstrate more accurately sort of their current practices. And then the group also had a really great discussion about how they can work together moving forward to continue to enhance service delivery, and also supports for their staff. So we have a sort of summary report going through those pieces at a higher level. And then there's also an appendix that was sent to you all that has a pretty detailed matrix about, different indicators, what the 2025 rating was, what happened last month, and any next steps that were identified by the group. So the next steps for the office will be to support the core partners to continue to move forward on the next steps that they've identified, and just continue to support continuous quality improvement. But that I want to also just leave space if anyone wants to add anything, but that was the sort of most briefly stated summary of that visit. But I would say Sabina, Kendall, Chris, if you want to add anything.
I would add it was a wonderful conversation with the partners that were there, and we have some really exciting next steps on a few of the areas where we want to continue to frame out what better collaboration and cohesion could look like. And Drake and Sabina, thank you for your efforts to pull together the research visit again, and take the feedback from July and modify the approach in the second conversation. Just appreciate your work. I know it was a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo what Kendall had said. One thing I would add is if they do need some help from some employers in terms, I talked about some tabletop discussions or just going through some motions there. Let me know. I'd love to contribute because I was involved with it in 2019 in a different fashion. It was really helpful. So I'm volunteering.
Gold.
Yeah, and Robin, somehow in my mind, the fact that you weren't in the room, I wasn't thinking that you were there, and I apologize. You were there virtually. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, I enjoyed being a part of it, and I felt like we went through some details that we don't always talk about, and it was helpful to have that documented and have a plan for moving forward. So, thank you.
Great.
Anyone have any thoughts, questions, and sort of like reviewing the materials that were sent out if you had a chance to?
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with the breadth of the improvements across all of the different categories. Without knowing a whole lot about it myself, I said there was obviously been a lot of work. So thank you very much for the attention that you obviously paid to it. I was wondering if there was like one or two things that really rise to the top of what
Good
after this,
question.
what your new priorities are.
Mm-hmm. I would say, and I don't want to speak on behalf of others, but folks can correct me if I'm wrong. To me, the two next steps that really rose to the top as being having agreement in the room that all partners want to work to continue to improve and find ways to collaborate is around referrals and co-enrollment for services of different partners. So there's some core partners that work really well together in referring and co-enrolling, but there's not like a uniform system for how that happens across agencies or across the state. So I think there's some really good work to do there to build on things that are already working, and just get some even more collaboration and consistency. And then the other piece that from my perspective rose to the top is around customer satisfaction, which isn't to say all core partners do invest a lot of time in hearing from their clients and customers about how things are going. They all have pretty robust customer satisfaction surveys. But what I think is an opportunity for the core partner network is to identify potentially some customer feedback questions that everyone is asking, to better inform continuous quality improvement and common processes across agencies, because it seems like folks are all kind of doing their own thing, which is often guided by federal requirements of the different performance measures that folks have to survey. But there was a lot of interest and engagement in finding some uniform questions that could be asked of customers. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
That's
there.
good. And I had one other question that's probably too vague or opaque, but we have this one-stop center, and it's noted that there are regional hubs or centers around the state. Does the evaluation look at those regional centers in any detail, or does it just assume that those places kind of mirror the resources that are available at the one-stop center? I'm just wondering, like, what consideration is given to those regional hubs?
So
I would-
that's a
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Sabina.
I was just going to say that we've been focused on the comprehensive one-stop center in Burlington, but the goal is that it should be a system-wide evaluation, and that will be starting to happen when we're meeting with different partners located in different hub, in different regions, that'll start to come together. But right now, so far, it's only been the comprehensive one in Burlington.
Yeah, and that's a WIOA requirement. So a lot of the WIOA regs are interesting in a state like Vermont because we are a single area state. There are other states that have multiple comprehensive one-stop centers. So the federal requirement is that we certify any comprehensive one-stop center, but certainly the services that are being delivered at the affiliate job centers across the state are equally as important. So I think a lot of that work we're hoping will come out through the one-stop partner network, which we've also, yeah.
Thanks.
What was our goal originally am I wrong in thinking Sarah Buxton first rolled these out? I mean, I remember there being a goal of like 4 or 5 of them, one on sort of north, south, east, west. There was a goal of having more than just one comprehensive one-stop, as I thought.
Oh,
Wasn't there?
Yeah, I didn't hear. I remember I was involved in that initially, Allison, and they had carefully designated them not to be comprehensive, not to overreach at the time, but I didn't hear anything about comprehensive at that time.
Mm.
Could have been a goal, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, it'd be great. Anyway, as we migrate more and more online, sadly, I mean, a plus and a minus, because we miss a lot of that interpersonal help, if they're good anyway, that is really
Right.
can be so helpful.
Lila, I see your hand up.
yeah.
Just looking at the matrix, and thanks for putting that together. And I was not on the visit, my apologies, but an area, I guess, of concern is that, and I think you may have said it, Drake, it looks like from the report, there are 23 different programs that are supposed to be working closely together. And the effectiveness of service integration continues to be limited from one year to the next. And it looks like there's some activities that are going to go on to enhance that. Is there a strategy around that? How do you make that happen? Because that really is the crux of this whole thing, getting everybody to work together.
Yeah, so I would say there's a number of strategies, and a lot of, I think what gives me hope in this is that we've been really intentional with how we've sort of relaunched the network, gotten the MOU back in place. The core partners have been working really well together on the WIOA state plan recertification that you all approved and this certification like workflow. So I think there's some great collaboration and trust building happening. Not that there wasn't before, but just continuing to have folks get really great rapport with one another. And just last week, so we have our core WIOA partners, which are the 4 I mentioned, and then there are many more required partners, which include the community action agencies and Resource and all the signatories on the MOU also are providing services that are incredibly important to job seekers and employers, and that ensuring that the services that are provided are integrated is really critical to the quality of the system. So last week the full one-stop system had their first quarterly meeting, and after a time, I can't speak to how long it was that they were not meeting. So there, I think, are a lot of opportunities for, joint trainings, more coordinated events. I think the referral work that I mentioned that the core partners are interested in could really be brought into the full system of partners as well. So I think our one-stop operator, EDSI, is going to be someone that we lean on pretty heavily to support facilitating more engagement and collaboration, and more resources to that system of partners. The Office of Workforce Strategy and Development under WIOA and through our one-stop operator is responsible for supporting, better coordination and alignment. That's what we're here for. So we're sort of at the beginning of that process to really determine the best ways that we can plug in to support that. But I do think, one more immediate next step is to continue to support the group of core partners to get together and think about better processes around referrals, and then loop in the broader network of partners. So I think there's a lot of really great work to come, so that the next time we're certifying the comprehensive one-stop, we will hopefully, I think I can predict with a lot of confidence that one indicator will no longer be limited, because we've really identified now a desire to improve. And I have a lot of confidence in those folks to continue to move forward and make progress on that.
So it sounds like a return to regular meetings is something that is going to be a focus.
I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
following the quarterly meeting I mentioned that happened last week for the full system of partners, our one-stop operator, Paul Ferraro, is going to be conducting one-on-one outreach with each partner to get a better feel for how the system can be supportive, what kind of trainings their staff need, how they want to lean in. So we think that approach will be really beneficial as well, so that we're not just, having group meetings, like really figuring out what's going to be valuable to those organizations. Will continue to inform, the strategies that come out of that work.
Any other questions or comments? No, okay.
Sorry, Sabina, one last thing I would say on the sort of comprehensive piece is, in the conversations that I've been part of, I think there's a real energy and commitment to building more of a system mindset across the state when it comes to workforce development services. So it's true that we do have, this comprehensive job center in Burlington, but I think the hope is that no matter where Vermonters are seeking services, whether it's in Burlington, in St. Jay, virtually, that the services that they're receiving, whether it's from, the Department of Labor, Higher Ability, Capstone Community Action, that they're getting a high quality of service, and no matter where they start, they get rooted to where they need to be. And so I think we're hopeful that the direction we're heading in is going to lead to better outcomes for Vermonters. And I don't know if anyone, Jay, I see you came on camera, so I don't know if you want to chime in.
Hi, everybody. Just to add, something that I've been discussing with our team at the department is we serve 5 generations of Vermonters, and each generation has a different preference about how they interact with others. So as we're trying a strategy to engage high school and college age students, I think we're needing to shift a little bit more to a virtual version of what we do. And older workers have a preference to come in and talk to someone. So we still need to maintain a physical presence, whatever that looks like, while we're leaning into using technology and other resources so young people can engage at however they want to. So that's part of the discussion that we're having here. As we replace Vermont Job Link, what does that new system look like? And how do we make sure that it is serving young people and our older workers who are re-engaging in the workforce or needing to access services in person?
Yep. Okay. Anybody else want to add anything before we move on? Okay. I know that some folks have to leave by 2, as we discussed earlier, but just next thing on the agenda is board committee updates, the subcommittees that we've been standing up. I'm gonna, again, I hate to do this too, Drake, I'm gonna let you take a little bit of the lead on this because you've been working with 2 and 4, and start there.
Sure. Before we move on though, Sabina, did you want to have folks vote on the follow-up certification?
I'm not, yeah, I guess I was choosing not to
Okay, we can
But-
return to it next month. That's fine.
next month. I
wanted
feel
to
like
just
that
confirm.
might be, yeah, sorry.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. That sounds great. So we wanted to give a brief update on what's been happening with committees thus far. So you all passed 4 goals and we've established 3 committees based on those goals. I will say the third goal around supporting businesses to stay here, grow here, move here. We've elected not to establish a committee yet and have been working with Commissioner Jepson and Deputy Commissioner Grimley to just make sure that what the board passed in the fall is reflective of the current priorities of the Department of Economic Development. So there may be some slight tweaks to that goal that would come back to the board for approval before we establish a subcommittee, just because there were some leadership changes in that. It's really important for that goal to be really aligned with priorities of the department. So I'll just keep talking until someone tells me not to. The Goal 2 committee has met twice. That's around supporting adults to re-engage and advance in the workforce. Those have been great meetings. And what the committee has expressed interest in at this point is the first 2 strategies in the goal, which is around, getting a better sense of what services, courses, education, and training opportunities are available to assess any gaps, which is in very close alignment with the office's requirement to maintain an inventory of workforce education and training programs. So at the last meeting of the committee, we had Tom Cheney from Advance Vermont come and talk about My Future VT, which is their resource that includes a lot of workforce education and training opportunities. So continuing to focus on that. And the other piece of the goal that they've expressed interest in working on is around completing the previous board's work to approve a statewide definition for credentials of value and a process for approving them. So we're still sort of figuring out how to continue to move that work forward. The previous board made some good progress, but that work wasn't completed. And then there was a discussion about whether there could be some sort of a credential around workforce readiness, because we know in a pretty tight labor market, what a lot of employers are looking for is for folks to show up on time, and not necessarily some of the types of credentials beyond that. They can train their own folks, but some folks in the last committee meeting were expressing that that's a real need right now. So I think moving forward, they'll continue to dig into those topics. And I want to pause for a moment if anyone from that committee would like to share any additional updates on the work thus far.
I think you did a good job. I think it's a very engaged committee, and I'm looking forward to keeping going with it, particularly after session.
Yes, agreed. And this is the committee that you all have approved 3 non-board members to participate in. So they were able to join for their first meeting, which is great.
And we had a lot of them,
Mhm.
non-board members.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're continuing to get folks reaching out who are interested. So at the next committee meeting, there may be a couple of additional folks for the committee to review. And if the committee wants to move forward with recommending those folks, it would come back to the executive committee.
Well, and I think additionally, as Lyle does his work this summer and fall on really taking an inventory of all the resources that we offer our growing businesses as they in each stage of development, this can work hand in glove in some ways, because a lot of these Lyle will, a lot of what we're producing and will work well with what you're trying to get a sense of.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. And thanks to Senator Clarkson and Representative Marcotte, hopefully that bill will go through and that we will be doing a report. And I think it really goes hand in glove with that 4th committee. So it'll be, we hope some good work will come from that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep. Yeah. Yes, the committee that it both our group 2 and the one that's looking at what do businesses need, because that's a piece of what Lyle and Nick are going to be identifying is what resources do we offer already, and don't we offer? What do businesses need? I mean, at Manufacturers Day at the State House, it was clear. I wish we'd had more time and had a survey that we could have handed out to them all and said, what resources do you need well, first of all, how few of them actually knew about all the resources we do offer in the state. But that was shocking to me that one person raised their hand. But independent of that, how can we find out what they do need, which is key.
Mhm. Absolutely. So that's where we're at with that goal 2 committee. I'll also share that the goal 4 committee, which is around increasing retention of post-secondary graduates, they held their first meeting as well,
good.
which was great. And I think where they're hoping to start is getting a better sense from post-secondary institutions, how they understand graduate retention trends and what they're seeing. So they initially want to hear from our 2 public institutions. So we're reaching out to UVM and the state colleges to determine who the right person would be to come speak to the group so they can get sort of a better grounding in current trends. So that's where we are now in planning for the next meeting, and then would hopefully also be able to engage with some of the private institutions as well. So there could be some great, exciting work there, potentially off session too, maybe engaging with some current students or recent alumni to better understand, what has informed their choice to either stay in Vermont or not, and what could be helpful. So we'll keep folks updated on that. And then,
Drake,
oh, go ahead.
Drake, on that, you might also want to loop in Trisha Coates, who, Mike, does Trisha's office oversee the Green Mountain Incentive Program, or whatever the hell we're calling it these days, our $5,000 a year to keep young people in Vermont for 2 years? Does she does her Office of Engagement oversee that? I thought she did.
I think so.
I think
It is
so.
the UVM Office of Engagement. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Kendall. So Drake, I think she'd be an interesting person too, because she's seeing who's choosing to take advantage of that grant program, and why. And that, I think that would be an interesting, because that's a very direct incentive to young people to stay in Vermont. And she might have some interesting thoughts about who takes us up on that offer and who doesn't and why.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So that's a brief update on that committee. And then the goal 1 committee around increasing the supply of workers in key sectors had their initial meeting, which was great. I was not there for the whole meeting, but I did tune in for part of it, which was wonderful. Kendall, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Is there anything that you want to share as the chair of that committee with how things are shaping up thus far?
Sure. So goal 1, again, was what are the 5 priority sectors in Vermont? What is the workforce gap or demand? And what are recommendations to close that gap? So what we discussed at a high level in the first meeting, and I'd welcome Chris to also jump in here, was there might already be sector-specific recommendations and strategies that exist from a variety of different places, whether it is the previous strategic plan from the State Workforce Development Board that did have a set of recommendations, at least for manufacturing, and I can't remember the other sector that was in there, or for healthcare, we have obviously Susie Trombley in AHS's shop that is pulling together a healthcare workforce strategic plan. There's a Vermont Talent Pipeline that recently held a summit and came up with recommendations, et cetera, where we should do basically a review of what's out there for these sectors. And if there are things that we think are still relevant or we want to adopt, we don't necessarily have to fully reinvent the wheel. And we can look at what already exists and either fill in gaps or use it as a way for these other organizations to see their good work reflected, right, in state government and what we're doing. So our next steps are we need to go essentially and do this cataloging exercise, which is simple on its face, but is going to take some time. And then the other thing that we were noodling on is we might want to also somehow recognize and pull from the work of these other subcommittees, because the recommendations to fill those gaps for these sectors are going to potentially be things like retain more college graduates, whatever the relocation committee comes up with. And I know that we all say this all the time, but I just continue to reflect on the fact that we need more bodies. Like, we need more bodies. Otherwise, we're just cannibalizing different sectors and each other. So I'm not quite sure how to fit that in, if anyone has any good ideas in terms of what this eventually looks like. But that's a recap of our approach to this work. And Chris, I'd welcome you to redirect anything I just said.
No, you said everything. The only thing I would add is I think one of the other sectors was like in the trades, for example, the private sector, they pooled money to develop the Vermont Construction Academy, for example.
Yep.
So that would be one thing I would add there. And you're totally right. I think there's going to be intercepts to the other goals. And so as we pull that together, we'll have, I don't want to call it a parking lot, but another area to capture that in terms of what might be useful for other committees and what they're coming up with information from talking to folks. So I think my personal view is it's a big ball of wax in that goal one. So it's just a matter of how we can continue to piece all that together. There'll be continuous information that we find out from various sectors that we need to include. It's just how we want to, and I think we're mulling that over now. I think that's safe to say, Kendall, how we're going to not just capture information, but how we can best utilize it. So
Exactly. And Jim
And not to
Sullivan
you're
is
right,
also
not to-
with us. Oh, yeah. Sorry,
Oh,
Chris.
no, and not to cannibalize, you're right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And sorry, Jim was also there too, if Jim, you wanted to weigh in as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, not much to add. I think that assessment of what exists is critical. I mean, I know I have in my mind, what I've heard in our area are gaps and barriers in some of those areas, like construction, trades, manufacturing, healthcare, and social services in particular. And, so I would certainly be interested to see how those observations mesh with what's been put together in the past and what gaps might exist. So yeah, definitely looking forward to getting into that. So thanks for that work.
Yeah. Okay, and it is 15, okay, quarter of. The last thing on our agenda is just updates from the office. Obviously, the subcommittee updates is redundant, so we'll skip it. And I'm passing it again to Drake because she did a lot of the work with Jay Ramsey here on submitting the WIO state plan modifications. Do you want to just give a brief?
Yeah, we can go quickly through these other pieces. So we submitted the state plan modification back on March 2nd, which feels like a lifetime ago, and also yesterday, which is great. And again, that's a really good example of the productive partnership between the WIOA core partners. Everyone was really intentional with working together and even thinking about how we can envision the next full state plan redo, which will be in another 2 years, to be a really comprehensive process. And just as a quick reminder, this is a requirement, a federal requirement midway through the state plan period, which comes in 4-year chunks. We pursued a very minimal modification. So the existing WIOA state plan goals were not modified, and really a lot of the work was to show alignment between the existing WIOA state plan goals, the goals that you all approved back in November, and the recently released federal workforce priorities. So that took up a good chunk of the modification. And now we wait to hear back from the U.S. Department of Labor. My understanding is that there's generally a little bit of back and forth. They may ask some clarifying questions about certain sections of that modification, and we will keep you all updated, but we're feeling really confident in what we submitted and are grateful for those who provided input. And for for the next WIO estate plan, which should be in 2028, you can expect a pretty robust development process with a lot of opportunities for engagement, which should be great.
Terrific. May I just ask, how was your workforce development meeting in Washington that you two went to?
Oh my gosh, thank you for asking. It was
Yeah,
great.
because that's your out into the national scene.
I
It was
know.
curious to see how that went.
It was great. Yeah. So Jay and I went down to DC. Was that? It was in the past few weeks, I think.
Yeah, it was during crossover. That's how I remember.
What is time? And it was a Workforce Development Policy Institute. So it was a lot of, governors, advisors on workforce development. There were representatives of state workforce development boards. So in the future, maybe we could get some of our board members to attend those convenings. And it was great. A lot of, at least for me personally, it was very affirming to be in a group of folks who do very similar work to me. And the real truth is that most states are dealing with the same things we are. So as much as we like to say Vermont is special, we are also in good company with a lot of the challenges and opportunities that we're facing in our workforce space. And there were some really interesting insights around workforce Pell, around AI. I don't know, Jay, what were your takeaways, Mr. Ramsey?
I think that's it. The other states are struggling with roughly the same things that we're struggling with. How do you expand registered apprenticeship? How do we ensure that the public workforce system makes sense to the people that we're supposed to be serving? What's the role of AI in training? But also, what about those states that are trying to build data centers and attract these large scale, basically warehouses for computers? Really interesting discussions there. The last day we heard from a deputy secretary or someone from the US Department of Labor who was there signaling all of the interesting things that were coming down the pike in the next few months from the Employment and Training Administration. And so the feel from the meeting is, at least from the Department of Labor's perspective, they're trying to listen to states and respond to what states have been concerned about over the last several years as it relates to the complexity of programs. And again, back to that, the workforce system doesn't necessarily make sense to the people that we're supposed to be serving. So what can the feds do to fix that? Or maybe not make it worse?
And I think in a lot of ways, there were some pretty encouraging signs to me that the work we're doing in Vermont is really effective. In hearing how some other states are talking about workforce Pell, they were expressing a real frustration that their workforce and education systems weren't working well together. That is the opposite of an issue that we're facing. I feel like we have really strong partnerships. Some states were also expressing relative to the rural health transformation program, again, like not having great communication between their healthcare agencies and their workforce agencies. And I think, in Vermont, we're just more collaborative, perhaps partially because we're smaller, but I think we've also built really good relationships, across agencies, which puts us in a good position relative to some of the feedback we were hearing from other states.
Right. Well, that's why you go. It's very it's exciting to see how we.
Yeah.
And I think some of our workforce opportunities, particularly if they're unique and better than our other states around us, our aeronautics, for example, conceivably could be a way to get at what Kendall is getting at, which is growing our population. So, as we increasingly have better, if we ever get a Culinary Institute reestablished, and it's of course outstanding, I envision that as being a net bringer-inner, bringing more people into the state, just like some of our key and unusual workforce development opportunities.
Definitely. Well, Well, that's a good segue,
I would,
perhaps, to
you
the next.
took the words out of my mouth. Yes.
So we just wanted to give a brief legislative update. There's a bill that Senator Clarkson is very familiar with. S327 is the Senate's economic development bill, which recently passed over to the House. And that includes a report on the feasibility of reestablishing a culinary institute. So I don't know, Senator Clarkson or Representative Marcotte, if you have anything you want to add. We just want to make sure folks are aware of that piece.
Well, it supports one of the sectors we've already identified, which is our tourism and hospitality sector. And that pipeline, that workforce development pipeline is dried up pretty fully. And so we really are, our CTE students who do very good culinary programs are needing a place that's affordable, that's in state, that they can go to. There are some out-of-state programs that are nearby, but they're a little more expensive. And it would be great, obviously, to go to Kendall's point, to keep them in state, and to bring others in. Anyway, our restaurants and hospitality world are desperate for this pipeline to be rebuilt. And we're going to hope that they're desperate enough to help finance it, because it's going to need some, and it may need to be phased in. I mean, we can be very creative about how we go about reestablishing this. And there are so many people. I've just started to keep a whole list of people who want to be involved in this conversation once we unleash it. So once we get at it. So I think it is, it's going to be an interesting and exciting opportunity for us, and one that we know is desperately needed. And Mike's going to add a lot. Mike's committee is going to add a lot to the economic development bill, I'm sure. And they're working on your CTE bill, which you might want to talk about briefly, Mike.
Well, it'd be pretty brief because we're not quite there yet.
I know, but it's exciting what you're working on.
Having a hard time getting Ledge Council and JFO, because Ways and Means is taking their time right now. But we'll keep working on that. I know that the Agency of Education has proposed an ESSA, Education Service Agency. I don't think we're ready to go down that road yet. Maybe looking at telling the Board of Education they need to draft new rules for CTEs. They haven't been upgraded since 1998, I think, somewhere in that area. So that needs to be done. And then I think we're looking at possibly a legislative working group that will actually start talking about what's the governance structure, how does this work with whatever we pass as far as the education system goes. So that's what we're thinking about on CTE. Joyce Judy will be in on Wednesday to talk to us about the Culinary Institute and some thoughts that she has. So see how that all works out too.
She has thoughts. That's why I mentioned the financing. I mean, we're going to have to figure out a way because I think they are the natural umbrella for hosting it and a home for it. And the question is, how do we make that work, and how can we help them raise the money to make it happen? How can we create all those great national restaurant chains that once?
Well, and I think, we need to understand better too, and maybe we'll need to talk with Jay as well as, how far can we get with certifications in the culinary world? And can we create an apprenticeship program for culinary like we have for the electricians and the plumbers as well? So I think, and maybe we need to start with the State Workforce Development Board as a subcommittee that can start looking at some of those questions that can be answered, and come back to us maybe next year with some suggestions.
Yeah, I agree, because some of the early feedback I've had is we don't just need chefs, we need everybody else. And that is a very stackable credential kind of opportunity, so that we can bring people in as sous chefs. I mean, it's a great training, a stackable opportunity. I agree with you. And we can phase it in all sorts of interesting and creative ways. We have all these culinary CTE centers that are underused big time. A lot of them, those kitchens, you know, we could begin programs in some of those and better use them. And then
Yeah.
building in our adult ed system with it and our adult CTE. So, I mean, it's full of opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I think, you know, I know that our CTE center up here at North Country, they're not teaching a culinary right now because they don't have enough students. And so it's also going to be how do we get the message to the students as well.
Yep. Here.
So more to come on that. And I know there's some folks who have to hop off, so I think we're going to try to wrap by 2. The last update that we want to share with you all is when we had done a sort of initial review of proposed bylaw changes, which we will be circling back to, Jim. We just need to get a little more info on the, you know, membership of the committees and some of the questions that y'all raised. But one of the things that came up in that review is that we don't have a designated youth committee, which is a requirement for the board. So what we have done since we last met is reach out to the an existing committee. So the Summer and After School Advisory Committee, which exists currently, has a youth career exploration subcommittee. And we've been talking with them about whether they might broaden their scope a little bit to serve as the youth committee of the board. So that group has agreed to do that. They want to loop in the broader Summer and After School Advisory, but we think it's a really great synergy of, you know, a group that's already focused largely on the things that the youth committee is required to focus on. And a lot of the people that we would probably want to be participating in a youth committee. Kendall is already a member of that committee, so there is board representation. So we can talk about this in greater detail later, but just want to give you an update that we think we've found a solution that is creative and also meets the requirement. So we're excited to continue to collaborate with those folks. And that's what we got.
Yep.
For an agenda. I think we did it in an hour.
Right.
We just have to take a vote to adjourn.
So
Do you need a
move.
motion?
I make
Yeah,
the-
so moved. Second.
Allison,
And
seconded by
Kendall.
Kendall. Yeah.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Enjoy. Take
Talk to you
care.
later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.